Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our next EB5 webinar. We're pleased to be joined by three experienced professionals who will today share their insights on the current EB5 landscape, investor journeys, and the opportunities of today. Our host today is Sonia Clark, who is the Regional Director at First Pathway Partners. With more than 28 years of executive leadership experience across finance, real estate, investment, and international business, Sonia works closely with investors throughout the EB5 process to ensure that their needs are met. She is joined by our very special guest today, Shalu Hasaram, who is the Global Mobility Advisor at Henley Partners. Shalu advises high net worth individuals and families on global residence and citizenship solutions, helping clients identify their immigration pathways that best align with their personal and financial goals. And finally, we are joined by Manuel Ortiz, who is our VP of Global Business Development here at FPP. And with more than 20 years of experience in finance and investor relations, Manuel has led capital raising efforts that exceed $500 million from investors in more than 40 countries and is a globally recognized speaker on the EB5 program. And with that, let's get started. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And Shauna, once again, I would really like to thank you for your time today. It's an honor to be on a platform with you, yourself, and Henley Partners. We've worked very closely with Henley in the past, and this is a great honor, and I'm super excited, in going forward in our relationship. And today we're just going to be bridging the gap between US-specific solutions like the EB5 program and the broader global residency trends in 2026. So I just want to ask you, Shalu, Henley Partners looks at the entire globe of investment migration, and right now, what are the macro sentiments among the high net worth individuals? And we are noticing that the traditional Plan B rapidly evolving into like a primary Plan A for many families. What are your thoughts on that? If I can just hear those.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you to FPP for having me here today. It's fantastic to be here. I'd just like to introduce myself again. I'm Shalu Hasaram. I'm a private client advisor. I'm based in Singapore. I'm also the program director for US EB5. I'm responsible for managing it globally at Henley and Partners. So I think it's a very, very good question. And, Henley and Partner, we do a lot of reports, okay? Very sought after reports by private banks, family offices. And I think the most popular report that we have, and my favorite, is the Private Wealth Migration Report. So this year alone, it has been actually reported there will be 165,000 millionaires who are looking to relocate. That's a huge number and a very, very interesting dynamics, because if you look at what's happened this year, I think, everybody knows geopolitics has been front and center. For many years, Dubai has been such a, tax haven, safe haven. I think this year everybody woke up and realized that you cannot just put all your eggs in one basket. It's all about diversification. And we are not just talking about diversification in one country. We're talking about, you really diversifying across a few countries. So, at Henley and Partners, we have more than 40 residence and citizenship programs. It's like the whole gamut across Europe, Africa, Asia. So we help our clients, based on what their needs are. And we have seen nowadays a trend happening where, the parents could be living in one country, the children could be studying in the US or in the UK. And that's why we've also now introduced an in-house education service also, to help our clients, especially when their kids want to actually go and study in overseas countries. And we not only do it for US, we do it across different countries. But I think the most important thing why we are seeing such a shift is really because of various reasons. Number one is geopolitics. Second will have to be tax. I think tax is a very, very big thing for a lot of clients. So definitely they are looking for, places where they can optimize their, tax structures and all. So I think that's a very, very big thing also for a lot of clients. And I think a lot of them is also to do with, things like education as well as, healthcare, lifestyle. We have seen like a lot of, families who are perhaps based in Asia or what, they definitely want to look at alternative residence, like perhaps in Europe, Greece, Malta is very, very popular. But then the kids will probably want to study in another country and all. So we literally work with the client and, take them throughout the entire process. So yeah, there's actually a lot of reasons why a client, looks for an alternative resident citizenship. But I think this year the most glaring factor has to be, geopolitics. I think that is still what is dominating throughout the year. Yeah.
Thank you, Charlie. We're seeing investors coming out from all over the world looking at EB5, and it's really, truly an exciting time. And we've got a serious deadline approaching the 30th of September. And yeah, so it's a hard statutory cutoff for EB5 grandfathering protection. Manuel, I don't know if you want to maybe dive into that because we need a deep dive into the deadline in the current market.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would point out is that the September deadline is very important, and it's something that was in the RIA going back to when the new program was formalized in 2022, where it just says that investors that invest prior to September 30th are no longer protected by the grandfathering provision. So right now, what we're seeing is a really big rush in investors trying to meet that deadline so that they can be protected. And what I would say is that it's very important to focus on the fact that if investors want to take the most conservative path, get in before September. The program doesn't lapse until 2027, but to ensure that you're protected through the grandfathering clauses, the September deadline is very important. And these things takes time, as what we'll talk about later in the webinar as well.
So, Charlie, what are you seeing in terms of the September 30th deadline? What is happening from a Henley standpoint?
Yeah. I think before we actually started this call, I say it's been extremely, extremely hectic. I always tell my clients, number one, like control what you can control. And right now, we are not going to sit here and predict when things like backlog is going to happen for certain nationalities. Like I just tell my clients, it's an extremely futile process. I think even if the top attorney will not be able to predict when things like backlog is going to happen. So I just tell my clients the first and foremost thing is, control what you can control. And right now the visa is current. So if you have the available funds to, basically do this kind of investment, then definitely you should look to file your petition as soon as possible. And when I say soon as possible, definitely to be, with the grandfathering protection of 30th of September 2026. And I think when we sit with the client, explain why it is so important to file, because why would you want to file after 30th of September 2026 when you will not be get that kind of, legal protection and all. And then on top of that, next year we are going to be having an increased amount, for inflation adjusted. So I think clients do realize that, first of all, why would I want to pay a higher amount? Second of all, why I would not be, under the grandfathering protection. So I think with that, clients realize, right, the importance of filing before 30th of September. And I think another reason I've seen a lot of success of my clients who do rural projects. I think the best thing about the RIA was, when they created this special category called rural. So I have a number of clients who invested into rural projects. And I think, pretty much all of them have got their conditional green card. So I still very much till this day believe in rural because we see the data coming out, which is obviously there's always a talk between rural and high unemployment. I still very much, even last night I was having this conversation with this prospect who was telling me, she said that she was told there's no much difference between a rural and high unemployment. I'm like, no, that's not really true. I mean, I really stand by a rural project because it does come with expedited processing. And I've actually seen my clients benefit from it tremendously. So I think that's the kind of thing that I would definitely tell my clients to continue investing in rural projects. Yeah.
Hey, Charlotte,
Yeah.
just to add one quick point to this, because I think you make a great point in
Yeah.
terms of the processing times. You're talking about a 24-month plus timeline versus, what we saw in our last project was approvals in 3 to 6 months or something like that.
Yeah.
And even if USCIS times have taken a little bit longer recently, the difference is still gigantic, right? So you do have the
Yes.
priority processing. It's a big advantage. The last thing that I'll say is that investors, at least on our side, also tell us, hey, we've heard that urban projects are safer, so we have to get into an urban project. But reality is that if you look at historically, a lot of the projects that failed prior to 2022, most of them were urban, right? So from a due diligence perspective, it's really important for investors to really focus on the financial structure and the protections
Yes.
that are there. Is that asset valuable or not? So the percentage of the EB5 loan, the percentage of the loan to value, and those things are important. But if the percentages look good and the asset is worth nothing, right, then you're zero protected. So those are the sorts of things I think that is the next level of due diligence that investors need to conduct as they're making these decisions.
Yeah, very much so. And I totally agree with that, because I think I always tell a client, you cannot just decipher whether a project is good just because it's been tagged high unemployment or it's tagged rural. You really need to look at the project for its merit and really do a deep dive and see, okay, what's the project like? Who's the developer? What's the track record? How is it being structured? What's the exit strategy like? So I think that's a lot of things that we sit and talk to clients about, not like whether you should be investing in rural or high unemployment. I think that's not, but I definitely have seen so much of my clients who have benefited from rural that I have so much confidence in rural. So, that's the kind of trajectory and that's the kind of, direction I'm continuously taking it with all the clients right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually saw that with our previous project, where we were sold out. I mean, in record
Yeah.
time, where people were getting in line for rural projects, and I knew rural project Manuel's going to touch on it a little bit later, but I just wanted to mention those people in the United States that are either on an H-1B or an F-1 visa. There's something called concurrent filing. And well, I don't know if you want to touch on that because that could certainly help those people within the United States.
Well, we had a front row seat to this because in 2022, Bob Kraft was president of IUSA. And so, one of the important things is 95% of the regional centers in the US that are top tier active regional centers are members of IUSA. And so Bob has been elected president of IUSA 6 separate terms. He was president during that window of time and was in direct communication with the US government on behalf of the industry for purposes of the RIA. And one of the most beneficial things that was a part of the RIA was the concurrent filing, which basically means that people that are already here, right? Let's say take the student or the H-1B case, and if they invest in EB5, they could adjust their status, get permission to work and travel as if they were already approved. That option was not available before. And so it's a huge advantage that while your application is in process, you're able to get those permissions. Now, the caveat here is that right now, that's available. But as soon as visas run out, or like Shalu said, the keyword retrogression happens, that option goes away, right? So, on one hand, you have the September 30th deadline. That's a hard trigger. But the other one is when adjustment of status goes away is going to be when they run out of visas, right? So there are two things that investors really need to be conscious of there because that's just a huge advantage and it's been a game changer for EB5 and it's been a really good thing because as a result of that, you get more investor capital, which is great, but you're also creating more jobs in the US, right? So the positive economic impact that this is having is just great, and we're just very excited about it. It's been a big benefit to investors.
Yeah, and I just want to add something. I don't know whether this is something that you all have experienced. So I'm in Asia, and I think 100% of my clients do EB5 for their children, and I think it's a huge thing. America's education is still very sought after. So we have a lot of clients, and I think the Trump administration, I should not just single, the Trump administration actually made student visa restrictions, like, the duration is now, capped to that 4 years. And then recently there's a talk about a proposed 100,000 fee on the OPT. So last weekend I found myself talking to a lot of concerned parents. I think this has, made them realize that EB5 is the only way, because, a lot of parents who send their children to study in the US would want their child to get the opportunity to live there and work there, right? So this concurrent adjustment is such a powerful thing, and that's why when we tell parents that, whatever the Trump administration is doing, EB5 is still the most hassle-free and definitely the pathway to take. And I think it's a very, very good pathway for a lot of parents who are considering to sending their children to study, or those who are already studying in the United States. So it's a really big thing. That's what's happening right now, especially from an Asian standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, and not just Asia. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been talking to investors in the UK, in South Africa, other parts of the world as well. And having a look at the volatility in Europe, programs are closing and shifting in regulations like Spain and Portugal. What are the hottest destinations your clients are asking for right now?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the hottest destinations, it used to be the UAE, but I think that's kind of like taken a back seat right now. So definitely Singapore has become the biggest beneficiary as far as, wealthy people. Singapore has always predominantly been a wealth hub, but I think ever so after, the geopolitical tensions that's happening in the Middle East, Singapore is very much sought after. You would have seen, after what happened in, during the earlier period of the year, right? The amount of inquiries that came through for, people wanting to actually look at Singapore in terms of an alternate residence. Unfortunately, Singapore is a very high benchmark. They only want, a certain type of clientele to come, and you have to invest a substantial amount of money into a business or into set up a family office. So it's a significant amount of investment. And I think not everybody meets the criteria. It's not just money. I think Singapore also wants you to contribute in terms of, like, if you're like a tech entrepreneur or you have something special to contribute to the economy, that's what they really want. But I think in terms of Europe, definitely Malta is a standout. And I think the Malta program has actually gone through quite a bit of changes. Initially, it was, just an outright contribution to the Maltese government. Now it's called citizenship by merit. And I think it's a very interesting way, interesting framework where people are actually, they have to show what they can contribute. So I think there's always now an attract to how you're going to attract the best talent. And that's what we are seeing across the world. So I think even the Maltese government is actually doing that besides the contribution to the Malta government, you have to be able to, show what you can contribute to the government. And it's a very, very stringent, like when we work with clients recently, we were working with a tech entrepreneur, like we had to show that, what you can contribute in terms of to the Malta government. And then we had to document it. And then the Malta government had to approve it. So we are seeing a lot of changes. I think that's definitely each government is trying to attract, the smartest people to come into their country. Yeah, and I think Singapore and Malta are definitely a standout when it comes to, the hottest destination. And the not so hot destinations will have to be, UK. I think ever since UK has abolished their non-dom, they just seen so much wealth coming out of that country. A lot of the beneficiaries have predominantly been Dubai and Singapore. A lot of people from the UK, I think with the so-called, there's also talk about a wealth tax, luckily they have not actually launched that wealth tax. But I think just talking about things like these, right, makes a lot of wealthy people in the UK leave. And we have seen so many people in the UK leave, and they leave for, other countries like Asia, the Middle East, and Europe is a very, very popular destination, especially for people who are from UK. Italy, is very popular. The Malta is very popular. And I think one thing a lot of people don't realize is that when you actually get an alternative citizenship, like let's say even if you get a citizenship of Malta, and if you decide that you want to live in Switzerland, you're free to do so. That's the freedom you have of that just by being a EU citizen. So, we've really seen a lot of, changes happening. And I think the UK has been the biggest in terms of people losing because predominantly of the government and the tax standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been following the politics there, and it's not looking very great. And let's see what Andy Burnham can do. I think he's got a
Yeah.
task on his hands. But just in terms of mitigating risk, Manuel, and maximizing success, I just want to touch on source of funds because that's the most time-consuming part of the EB5 process. What would you tell investors in terms of that?
Pick a great attorney, and it takes time. And so, I would say really on the attorney side, working with an attorney that has a experienced track record and can put the story together, because at the end of the day, what you're doing with the 526 application is you're basically saying, hey, this is where the funds came from, and this is how they're getting to the project. Source of funds and path of funds are very important. Obviously, if the project is already approved, that box is already checked off. So I would say those are the two things that are important. Sometimes this process can take, 60 days. It can be done quickly, but we're running out of time here with the September deadline. And so I think it's important to work with a immigration attorney that has a strong track record. Oftentimes, investors focus on, hey, what's the track record of the regional center? And, with that, it's important, but at the same time, it's not going to be helpful that we did great on a project 10 years ago in California, and now the economy is different, interest rates are different, the market's changed, the neighborhood has changed, things change. So track record is important, but it's also important on the attorney side. What's their track record on filing I-526s? Are they taking risky decisions? You saw a policy alert that came out yesterday where USCIS is actually going to focus more on the packages and make sure that things are buttoned up the way that they're supposed to be, proper documentation on source and path of funds and those things, right? So that process is changing. So track record is really important. Pick a great attorney and somebody that's been in the business for a very long time. Because I can tell you, I started in EB5 back in 2013, and every day I learn something new. Just when you think you figured everything out, things come up, policies change, structures change, interest rates change. So just track record is a very important thing, and really just work with an experienced immigration attorney.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And we have attorneys that we can refer you on to, attorneys that we've been working with for a very long time, very experienced attorneys in EB5. Our project on Miali, we're in a senior position. And while before you wrap it up on our key takeaways, I think we should mention Amiali because it's just such a spectacular project and development. So you've been there, so I'm going to hand it to you.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I think are really important to focus on as well, that since the RIA 2022, there's been this huge focus on rural projects, like Shalu mentioned, and we were focused on them as well, but we've done too. And so we've seen other regional centers do heavy volume on them, but I can tell you from our perspective, it's very hard to find really good rural projects where investors are protected. You're looking at places that have a population of less than 20,000 people, and finding stuff with value in these locations is hard. So, we've done two projects since then. We're very happy with Amayali. The project is ahead of schedule in terms of construction, which is actually great. People are already living there. And really, from a structure standpoint, I would say it's really important for investors to focus on what priority of repayment am I in? Am I in the senior position that has a priority of repayment, or am I in a second priority of repayment? And I would say that this caveat, one doesn't make it better than the other. So it's not to say that all second priority projects are terrible. Not saying that at all, because there are probably some good ones that have different protections there. But what I would say is that if you have the ability to get into a priority of repayment, a senior loan, I would take a hard look at that, because it's always better to be in the first priority where you have a strength of repayment, right? And the case for the second position, just to mention really quickly, is that that'll typically mean that there's a bigger bank or a bank that has priority of repayment there. And the angle there is that it's great to have them there because they've conducted the due diligence on the project. So it's not just the regional center that's done the due diligence, it's a bank. Well, for Amayali, we actually do have an institutional quality partner there with that's providing the sea base called Clearwater. So they're providing sea base. They've done very rigorous due diligence. CPACE actually has to be approved by the local government, and also at the state level. But what's really important is that the senior lender in that position is the only one with the foreclosure power. So that's a really important thing to look at. But looking at those sorts of things, it's the next level due diligence that I believe investors need to look at as they're making these decisions.
Yeah, we've had a fantastic discussion today on our roundtable with Henley and with the top expert at FPP, Manuel. Thank you so much. Before we close off, just some key takeaways. Shalu, from your side, if I can just get some thoughts from you, and I know we've touched on the 30th September deadline looming. Just some takeaways for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely would tell any client that, please take the 30th of September 2026 deadline pretty seriously, because I think it's a very, very important protection that some clients might not realize. They still think, oh, the program is still 2027. I don't have to worry about it. So I think that's not the case. I think you would definitely look to file before 30th of September 2026 and do not delay. And yes, definitely, if you have, like, the team here has mentioned, that if you have a good project and if it's, classified as rural, definitely through expedited processing, because I do have seen my clients benefit from it tremendously. But yes, obviously you need to look at how it's structured and all. But yes, I think those are all the important points that I would definitely advise any person who is actually looking to do EB5. It's very important to file before 30th. And yeah, taking into everything into account, work with a very good regional center like FPP. And yes, having a very good lawyer is also very important.
For sure. And Manuel, key takeaways from you.
One of the important things that we haven't talked about that is very important is the people behind the project, the people that are working with the investor. That's a really important thing. EB5 is a long-term process. And just aside from liking the people that you're working with, it's very important for them to be qualified. That's first and foremost, and to have a great track record, but it also helps to work with good people as well. So definitely, there has to be a really good match there. And then I would say also, it's very important if you can make the deadline. That is great. A good attorney will tell you, hey, this looks like it has a great opportunity to be approved. Sometimes they'll say, we might need a little bit more time to make sure that we can document that. That's not the end of the world, by the way, because like Shalu mentioned, you have 2027. But if you can get in before September, definitely do that. And we'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to this.
Thank you, Shalu. Thanks, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.